In any conversation, whether it's a debate or a big negotiation, there's this hidden power that most of us totally miss. And it doesn't belong to the loudest person, it belongs to the last person to speak. Today, we're going to unpack that surprising influence. So, let me ask you this. Have you ever walked away from a discussion just feeling deflated? You made all the right points, you were totally on your game, but somehow the final decision went the other way? Yeah, it's a super frustrating experience, and believe me, there's a very real reason why it happens. A lot of the time, that frustrating outcome boils down to one simple thing: who got the final say? That very last comment, man, it can subtly reframe everything that came before it. And we're about to break down exactly how that works, the psychology and the strategy behind this really powerful phenomenon. We're going to call this the last word advantage, and it's not about being the loudest person in the room or the most aggressive. Not at all. It's a strategic edge that comes from understanding how our brains actually put together the story of a conversation. I mean, you've totally seen this play out, right? A debate has been raging for an hour, ideas are flying everywhere, and just when everyone is exhausted and ready to wrap it up, one person speaks up. They don't even add new facts, they just summarize the conversation with their own little spin, ending on their preferred outcome. And suddenly, that's what sticks in everyone's mind as the final decision. That right there, that's the advantage in action. But here's the really cool part. This isn't just some clever social trick. The last word advantage is actually rooted in some pretty fascinating cognitive science. It's all about how our brains are literally wired to process information. The scientific principle at play here is something called the recency effect. It's a really well-known cognitive bias, and it basically just means our brains give this special preferential treatment to the last thing we hear. Why? Well, because it's the freshest information. It's the easiest thing for our short-term memory to grab onto. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Hey, what about first impressions? Aren't those super important? And you're absolutely right. There's another thing called the primacy effect, where we remember the first thing we hear. But here's the catch. In a long, drawn-out discussion or debate, the recency effect often packs a much bigger punch. The opening arguments might set the stage, but it's the closing remarks that really define the memory. So why does the end stick so hard? Well, it comes down to three main reasons. First, cognitive ease. It's just easier. The information is right there at the top of our mental inbox, no digging required. Second, it works like a final summary. Our brain loves to neatly file away a conclusion. And third, it anchors our final feeling, our last impression about the entire conversation. Okay, so knowing the science is one thing, but how do you actually use this? Well, now we get to the good stuff. Think of this next part as your strategic playbook for getting yourself in the position to have that final, powerful say. But let me be super clear about this. The goal here is not to interrupt or just dominate the conversation. It's not about shouting over everyone to get the last word in. It's actually a skill of patience. It's about listening, like really listening, waiting for your moment, and then crafting a comment that just perfectly wraps everything up. And here's a simple little framework to help you remember it: the 3 S's. First, you summarize. You just briefly and neutrally recap the main ideas. This is huge because it shows you are paying attention and it builds your credibility. Second, you situate. This is where you neatly place your own key point or your preferred outcome right inside that summary. And third, and this is so important, you stop. Say your piece and then just be quiet. Let the silence do the work. Let your point hang in the air and really resonate with everyone. Okay, so you have the framework. Now let's talk about refining the delivery. Because being a closer is really an art form. It's all about how you craft and present that final statement to give it the absolute maximum impact. Let's look at some clear do's and don'ts. You absolutely do want to summarize and reframe. You want to be concise and clear and end with a tone of confidence. What you don't want to do is introduce a brand new argument at the last second. All that does is reopen the whole debate. You also want to avoid rambling. And please, never ever end with a question. It just completely undermines your authority and makes you sound unsure. And this quote it nails it, doesn't it? The first word opens the conversation, but the last word defines it. The opening statement gets things going, sure. But that final statement, that's what people carry with them. That becomes the lens they remember the entire discussion through. So, let's bring all this home. If there's one thing I want you to take away from this, it's a shift in your mindset. It's about moving from being just a passive listener in a conversation to becoming a strategic closer who can actually help guide the final outcome. And seriously, don't think this is just some fancy trick for the boardroom. This principle is at play literally everywhere. In your team meetings at work, sure, but also at the dinner table, deciding on a vacation spot, or when you're making big life decisions with your partner. Understanding this dynamic gives you a tool for clearer, way more effective communication in every part of your life. So let's do a super quick recap of the most important stuff. Number 1, the recency effect is a real thing, and it gives a ton of power to the final word. 2, speaking last lets you frame the entire conversation for everyone. 3, your secret weapon is the 3 S's: summarize, situate, and stop. And finally, your goal isn't just to be in the conversation, it's to be an effective closer. At the end of the day, the power of speaking last is a tool. It's a powerful one. It can be used to clarify things, to persuade people, and to make sure your perspective is the one that's really heard and remembered. So the final question really is for you. Now that you know about this tool, how are you going to use it?